Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Asher Agency, a full-service marketing agency with offices in Indiana, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. For nearly 50 years, Asher has helped their clients tell their stories, reach customers and prospects, and stand out from the crowd. To learn more about how we can help your company, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. My guest is Angie Carel. Angie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. A lot of the people on the podcast are folks I've known for a while, but this is actually the first time I think you and I have been in the same room, so I appreciate you taking us up on the invite. I've heard a lot of great things about you and the work you're doing, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about all that.
I appreciate you having me.
Well, let's start with your career path. I'm interested in where you've ended up, but I also want to hear where you started. So tell us a little bit about when you first started thinking about a career path. What were you thinking about? It probably wasn't AI at the time, but what were you thinking about, and where did you go from there in terms of education and beyond?
Well, started thinking about a career path in college, as most people do. But in college, I sort of diverted. I went to school for elementary education, and also computer science and journalism and graphic design. And
that sounds very familiar.
All sorts of things.
And this was at what used to be IPFW, correct?
Yep. So I was all over the place in college. I was one of those, I would have stayed in college for my entire life. I loved it so much. But then I got pregnant for twins, and I went to my counselor and I said, what's the quickest way out of here?
Yeah.
And she's like, you have everything you need for an education degree.
Okay.
So I took that, ran with it. But once I graduated, I took my first job doing marketing at a marketing agency and photography and sort of in the arts. And that's I fell in love with the industry right away, the creativity. I fell in love with the agency life, the fast-paced, multiple clients in multiple industries. And so that's sort of what started. I've never worked in another industry my entire life. But because I had my twins, and at the time I also had another daughter, so I had three daughters, got a divorce. So I had three young children, and I was a single mom.
Oh, wow.
And so at that point in time, I started my own agency.
That's a pretty big leap to take.
Yeah,
with
so
three young kids.
So I was shortly out of college. I mean, I was young, and a single mom of three, and was like, how do I make a living? And the only thing that I knew at that time was marketing, graphic design, and So did you have a client that you knew would help you establish the business, or did you say, I'll figure it out later, I just need to get this thing going? I said, it's the only thing I know how to do to make money.
Wow.
I'm really good at it, and I think my clients like me.
Okay. So
I need to get my kids to school, doctor's appointments, and everything else. So this is what I'm going to try to do.
Yeah.
And I just went for it, and it worked out for me.
Okay. Great. So was that an agency of how many people? How many staff did you have?
On and off through the years. So I had my agency for 18 years. And started with just me, obviously, working out of a 900 square foot home with a card table. I mean, no kidding. But grew it a year later, hired the, assistant that did the bookkeeping, and then a year later hired a graphic designer and so forth. So throughout the years, I had as many as 10 employees and then probably 20 freelancers at any given time that worked for me.
Did you find it difficult to stop doing the hands-on work and delegate it to other people, or was that easy for you?
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well, it's
absolutely.
true for a lot of people who end up running agencies, that they're great at doing the work and maybe not always so great at delegating until they learn that they have to do that.
I went through a phase where I hated giving up the work, for sure. And my employees definitely saw this transition. I was a micromanager, especially with creative. I am a hyper-creative individual. I can sit at a screen that's blank and always come up with something. I am never one that has creative block. So giving up the creative, it wasn't giving up the actual work. It was just the creative. That's what drove me. That's what, made me want to keep doing what I did. So, however, I would say, 12, 13, 14 years in, when I started seeing how the business was evolving and growing, I definitely started becoming more of a visionary. Mm-hmm. And I could see that this idea of growing a business to success was definitely still a creative feat. Yeah. And I started becoming more strategic in the way that I grew the business. And that definitely became more of a passion of mine as well. So, but ultimately, yes, that whole, I want to be on the ground working with the people, not the bridge between the people and the employees. That was, I lacked that when I was at the end of the agency, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think, that story is pretty common. I know that I came into marketing as a writer, and I had a hard time giving up the writing. Now it's the easiest thing to do because I like the problem-solving aspect. Writing is one way of solving a problem. And some of that is just recognizing, as I get older, there's people way more talented than me. Yeah. I'm a serviceable writer, but there's better writers out there. Yeah. So giving it up became easier over time. So you're owning a business. You were owning a business that was doing well, and then you decided to do something different. Why is that?
Well, backing up to the COVID shutdown, I had planted the seed. It was kind of, my employees knew this. I was on my way to consultancy. Mm-hmm. That was a plan in place.
And what was attractive about that? How did you see that as different than what you were doing leading the agency?
I had, my husband's from France. Yep. We travel out of the country a lot. You cannot get away without having ties to the agency, the employees. I loved my employees. They were the best employees you could imagine. But every time I left, someone called, someone needed something. I couldn't fully get away. I wanted to be in charge of my time. Mm-hmm. And in 10 years of having my business, I was a single mother. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like my next phase of my life was being in charge of my time. Yep. And so being in my next phase was being a consultant, saying no, saying, this is what I will be doing, this is what I won't be doing. So it was that was the next phase for me. Okay. And it was downsizing, simplifying, and being in charge of my time type of thing. So my employees knew that was on my horizon. Sure. But they didn't know, I didn't, lay it on the table. They didn't know everything that was in my head. Sure. But during the COVID shutdown, my husband and I kind of had some talks like, this is rough if this happened again, all this. And it kind of planted that seed. And then, how it happened was very abrupt. Mm-hmm. But and it was right at the time that, generative AI was hitting the scenes. Yeah. My employees knew that I was AI first. Mm-hmm. They knew that I was either taking us into being an AI first agency, or I was doing consultancy, and they didn't necessarily want to be consultants themselves, but leading an AI charge requires being a consultant. Yeah. You can't just jump in and start being a production person in that. So sort of, I took 2 trips out of the country, kind of back to back, and it's kind of crazy how it happened. But I was sitting in my library reading a book, and the pages of the book, and I won't go into the details, but spoke to me. Mm-hmm. Basically told me, you're writing your own. You're a writer. You're writing your own chapters. You're in charge of what's on the next page. Yeah. And that morning, it was like 2 days after I had gotten back, jet lagged, kind of probably not thinking straight, walked into the kitchen and told my husband, I'm done. Yeah. And then the next day I talked to my art director, who had been with me for 11 years. And then I talked to my other employees, and within 60 days had let go of all of my employees, all of my clients, had conversations with everyone, and started into consultancy.
Wow. And was the focus from the start AI? Was that where you were grounded as a consultant?
I was focused on artificial intelligence as it relates to marketing. I got into broad scope generative AI consulting. I wanted to focus specifically on marketing and AI, but this city is not. It's still figuring out it on a broad scope. So the focus was how artificial intelligence infused into marketing. And that was my path, but I haven't taken this specific path that I had planned.
Yeah. Well, tell me if this is your experience. I think that Fort Wayne is a unique community in its size in this way. And I say this as someone who moved here from Massachusetts when I was 24. I probably couldn't have even found Indiana on a map when I was 24, and then I moved here knowing no one. But what I've always said is now that I've been here 30 years, it's a place where there's enough opportunity that you can have a very fulfilling career, but the connectivity, because it is smaller, it's way easier to establish yourself as an expert if you tell a consistent story and if you back it up in the real world. If you don't, that story will spread too. But if you know what you're talking about and you pivot and you say, hey, here's what I'm about 6 months later, as long as you can back it up, people are like, yeah, that's what that person is about. Has that been your experience?
Yeah. I mean, I love so much about Fort Wayne. I love it. And I'm the size, just like you said, it's accessible, it's connected, relatable, and small enough that you trust people, you trust the stories people say.
Well, there's accountability. You know you're going to see people again.
Yes.
So if you burn a bridge, you better make sure it's a bridge you're not going to have to go back over at some point. Yeah.
And if you make mistakes, you tell people those, and yes, exactly what you're saying. We are all here, and so with what I'm doing, Fort Wayne has been I've been able to see it develop and flourish in Fort Wayne, and we're the largest community of AI in the state of Indiana. And it's working in Fort Wayne because of the size of Fort Wayne.
Yeah, for sure. Word spreads pretty quickly because of that connectivity. And, it went from, I think most people in Northeast Indiana are at least somewhat conversant in AI in terms they know what it is. In terms of actually having used it, I would say it's a fraction of the population, either generative AI or in another way, where they recognize it as AI, right? We're all using AI without even realizing we're using it. You do a Google search, in some respects, you're using AI.
You have a smartphone, you're using it every minute of every day.
So I think almost everybody's using it, but people who are using it intentionally is a different story. So I think there's still plenty of opportunity from an education standpoint. Where do you hope to make a dent? What do you think is the biggest opportunity that you see as a consultant where people maybe either know something is possible or maybe don't even know it's possible, where it's going to make a difference for businesses and for individuals moving forward?
I just got off a call right before this with somebody else. It's kind of asked the same question. That's such a hard question to ask because there's so many areas to make a dent. And I've struggled a little bit with that because I feel like, I always tell people, I feel like I'm a shoe in a dryer cycle. Have you ever had a shoe in a dryer? It's like, boom, 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 boom. Yeah. That's how I feel. Because I do understand broad scope generative AI. I understand all areas of generative AI. But everybody needs help with these areas. And so I've been trying to help corporate America, individual learners, nonprofits, personal projects, education outlets. So there's all of these areas. Recently, I think I've settled into knowing that the number one barrier of entry is literacy. So if I have to say, where do I want to make a dent? I want to help corporations and I want to help education systems, students, but I think everything has to be funneled through a literacy program. And so that's where I'm trying to channel my energy and my efforts is to get the city of Fort Wayne elevated in their knowledge of.
Yeah.
Because what you said just a minute ago is what, we don't know what's possible or we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm humbled because I network with and am in cohorts with some very high level AI, generative AI people. And I don't know what I don't know, but then the people that are following me don't know what they don't know. We all need to share this information because if you know what's possible, you will achieve that. You will learn that.
For sure. And some of it's just familiarity and breaking old work habits. I've been in the working world for 30 years, so I've got muscle memory that goes back that far, right? And my wife is very analog, and I'm very digital first. So just an example, I asked her for someone's address, and she wrote it down on a piece of paper. And my first instinct was to rekey that in, but I said, well, let me put that into, I think it was ChatGPT, and it turned into text. And for me as a child of the 70s, that was still magic. I was like, this is great, but I have to fight the muscle memory of, okay, the next step I take is this. So, I would assume you're spending a lot of time helping people understand how to disrupt their workflow to save time in the long run.
I think that what you just kind of touched on is like you have to make sure that it's at the top of your mind because generative AI can be infused into every piece of your workflow throughout the day, especially in task-based, everything. Yeah. And early on in my consulting, someone said, put a Post-it note on your computer that says AI first to make sure that everything that you're doing, you ask yourself, can AI supplement, augment, help me out in this area? And the problem with adults is that we always say to ourselves, it's just easier to do it than learn how to do it. Yeah. So we have to be able to say to ourselves, if I can solve with AI, I need to take a detour, spend an hour learning how to do that because that will save me. And I'm not kidding you, 70% efficiency gains by taking an hour to learn how to do that with AI. But as adults, first of all, a lot of times we say, oh, it's just an email. It's just an email. It's not important enough. Or we just say, I can do that faster than learning how to do it. Yeah. And we have to get out of that mindset because the efficiency gains at the task-based level are enormous.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. I mean, there's a quote that I've heard multiple times, and I forget who it's attributed to, but in our workday, we should stop and say, how could this be easier? Instead of just going with, I'm going to go with the impulse and the immediate thought that I have of how this gets done. And, if you have staff, sometimes delegation is the right tool. But AI is a different kind of delegation where you're delegating it to a system. And that can be even more beneficial than delegating it to a human, but we don't think to do it because we have the way we've always done it. So I think that's really insightful to have that Post-it note, a very analog way of remembering.
We need a visual cue to just to constantly ask ourselves. And corporations or companies or agencies need to allow for their employees to have some flexibility in their time to be able to say, if you notice a thing that can be augmented through generative AI, you have the flexibility in your schedule to take an hour to solve for that.
For sure.
But everybody's workload is at max capacity because that's how we work in the United States. So,
or it's they perceive it's at max capacity, but they're spending 2 hours a day on Facebook.
On emails or Facebook, So hopefully not Facebook.
Geez.
That's
a whole different podcast.
And I'm not invited to that one.
I don't think I have either, so somebody else is going to have to do that. What would you say to the skeptics? People who don't want to use AI, they don't think that the benefits outweigh the risks. I think that's tempered over time, but I still hear people say, that's not for me. Somehow they think it's cheating. Somehow they think it's, unethical to use AI. And there are cases where it is. But these are cases where you're using it, I'm using it. What would you say to that person who is throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
I've stopped talking to them. In all reality, when you dig into, yes, in every technological advancement, there are negatives that come with the positives. There's balance in everything, and I believe there's balance in everything in this world.
Yeah.
But I talked to my mother about this, and when you look at the positives that are coming out of artificial intelligence, and I'll just give a quick example. Everyone is very concerned about the copyright and ethical use of artwork and image generation. Yeah. But I sat in an audience and listened to the technology disruptor at the Cleveland Museum of Art who has used artificial intelligence to generate the text descriptions for blind people on the back end of their website for the art, 65,000 pieces of artwork on the back end of their website. She took generative AI, she put the artwork in there, generated the text descriptions, and then she took the text descriptions, put that back into generative AI, generated an image and compared it to the original image to make sure that blind people could visualize the same image that was actually on the website. So the people that are skeptical are basing their skepticism on fear. Yeah. So what I would tell them is learn, educate yourself. How does it work? Because it's not intelligent. It's not a human behind the computer. It's a computer doing what a computer does at a scale that we cannot possibly imagine and a speed that we can't imagine. Learn. Yeah. That's what I would say to them. Go learn.
Well, this is an oversimplification, but it's a tool, right? It all depends on how you're going to use it. And there's great applications of the tool, and there's applications that aren't so great. But it's a reality. It's not like you have a choice. You're not going to have a choice whether you use AI.
Yeah, I mean, the companies that do not adopt AI will, and without a shadow of a doubt, be out of business. Yeah. They will not be able to keep up. I am working as an agency of 7 right now. I competed on a pitch campaign against an agency of 7. Yep. And so marketing agencies that don't understand how to, and that's not meaning that you should have an agency and eliminate 7 people. That's meaning that 7 people on your team can work as 7 more people. What can that agency do?
And do higher level work. The analogy that I heard a long time ago is that when programs like Lotus 123, that'll be a throwback for some people, Lotus 123 first came out, there were some accountants who were like, oh no, that's the end of our profession. And it's like, no, this allows you to focus on things that really require your unique skills. And I think that's what we're seeing is, it's garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. But if you do have a skill and you can outsource, if you will, some of the more make work stuff to AI and really focus on where your creativity is needed, that's where the good stuff's going to happen.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that say creativity is taken, it's being stolen from the humans. I'm a creative. I'm here to tell you if it's stolen from me, I'm not going to do it. But every day, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, I am able to create like I've never been able to. My 6-year-old is able to create, animate, generate videos. Like his skills, his vocabulary, his imagination is out of this world because of generative AI. It doesn't steal the creativity from the humans. It amplifies it. Yeah. But you have to be willing to explore to figure that out for yourself.
Well, and you have to be willing to learn that your answer isn't always the best answer.
Yeah.
There's a tool I use. I am the world's worst typist. And my handwriting
But you're a writer?
And my handwriting is illegible.
Oh, wow.
But what has saved me is voice to text. There's a tool I use called Voice Notes, which I voice to text, and then it has different use cases, and one of them is email. There are times I look at that, and it's like, that's way better than what I was going to say. Yeah. It improves upon it in a way that, it's still true to the thought, so the creativity is in the thought. Right? In how am I going to interact with this person? But I can't argue too much with the result because it's it's better than what I would come up with on my own sometimes. So in terms of the services you offer, let's talk a little bit about that. You have classes for individuals or organizations that want to learn about the application of AI, correct? Yeah. You have a meetup that is twice monthly. That's AI in Fort Wayne, correct?
Yes.
And what am I missing aside? That's a lot.
Well, I do corporate consulting. Yep. And I help teach teams basically upskill. I hate that word. I hate upskill. I like reskill better. But I teach teams the fundamentals of generative AI. So I host agency-wide or corporate-wide workshops. And then I help them understand. I guess the main problem that people are facing right now is they understand generative AI from a basic standpoint. They don't understand how the practical application of how it fuses into their business model, their workflows. And so I help them understand practical use cases. This is a big problem because the CEOs want all of these like major headline pie in the sky results. And I'm like, wait, the real magic is way down here. So I do help corporate as well, but I'm putting a concerted effort this year into individual learners. And that is the community of Fort Wayne, because the World Economic Forum just launched a report. And in the United States, unlike other countries, the initiative of learning AI is 90% or 80-something% through individual learners. It's initiated by individual learners versus corporations. In other words, corporations are not saying, hey, we want our people to learn AI. The individuals are saying, we want to learn AI.
And then peer-to-peer, they're teaching each other.
Yeah, they're yes, and I wish it were the other way around, but it's not. So I host workshops on I've done consulting for 2 years now. So of the topics that I feel are most relevant and helpful, I craft workshops and I offer those to the community. And then those are published on Eventbrite or on my website.
And right now, those are all face-to-face.
And I'm doing everything. Everyone's like, oh, my gosh.
Is that because you prefer – I mean, I do as someone who teaches occasionally. I do online, but it's not nearly as rewarding, and I don't think it leaves as much of a dent as when you do it in person.
My whole thing since the very beginning, 2.5 years ago, has been as we move towards a world where we interact with computers more – the connection with humanity is exponentially more important.
Yeah, I think that's really well said.
And I want to be and I am kind of borderline introverted, but I want to be with humans. And so my thing is, you got to show up.
Yeah.
So the AI and FW, there's a daytime meetup and an evening meetup. And so several people have said, I can't make it. Can you? No. Those are in person. I am in the process of creating a learning world and where the community will be able to have the courses online. But right now, everything is in person.
And that's through Discord, correct? Did I see that?
We have an online Discord channel. That's an extension of the AI and FW community.
So it's meant to be a complement to, not a replacement for.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really admirable. It's kind of easy to say, well, I'll do both. Yeah. But when you take a position on it, I think that's meaningful. And I want to go back to something you said that I really love is in a world where, there's the playing field can be really even. What's going to differentiate people is that they're good at AI, but they're also good at the things that AI can't replace, things like communication and leadership and relationships, right? If you can do both, you're going to have a great career. Yeah. But just being good at AI isn't going to get you very far.
No, you have to have real world experience.
Yeah.
And the other thing is about the in-person, just want to touch on is I'm not in online communities are generally targeted, as marketing for a scalable growth. I'm only trying to connect Fort Wayne and surrounding.
Yeah.
There is no reason why someone here in Fort Wayne cannot get out of their house, unless they can't get out physically, and come to my event.
Yeah.
So I have no reason to. I don't want to scale this. I want Fort Wayne. We have people coming from North Manchester, Indianapolis, all over. Yeah. So that's that.
Well, and that's it's where a limitation can be a strength, because you're going to know this community and know the people in the community at a much deeper level than if you tried to be all things to all people.
So if somebody has this human connection and they struggle with developing an app utilizing AI, they can say to their neighbor, I need help with this. And I think that's so important in this culture building societal change.
Yeah. Okay, let's pivot to some quicker hit questions. They don't have to be quick hit. A lot of times I ramble, so feel free to do the same. What would you say is your best career advice as someone who has owned a business, started a business, changed your career path? What do you think is your best career advice?
Like funny, or like, like never start your own business? Or I always say, I think, especially right now more than ever, is like just make time for play. And by play, I meaning learning, but let your curiosity drive you and let that be your path, because I don't think anyone can be happy if they're not, following their natural path of curiosity. So that's my advice, is just make sure you have that time allotted in your scheduled day, whether that be work or in your personal, just like whether that be called personal growth, lifelong learning, I don't care, but I call it play. Make sure that is, in your schedule. Yeah.
Well, and it's what Google allegedly does with 20% of the work week, right?
But I taught Google that. I forgot to tell you. That was my business advice when I was on the Google podcast. I gave them that, and then they ran with it.
Did you give them the "Don't be evil" as their mission statement? Because they haven't really held up to that.
No, I didn't. No, that's not me.
Okay, all right. Second quick hit question, and this one may be really easy for you to answer. What's a myth or misconception about the work that you do that you would like to debunk?
Oh gosh, that it's easy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do still think that AI is a magic wand, and I think they think that because of the headlines, it's 70% efficiency gains are achievable, and actually it is easy to achieve that. But getting to the point where you can apply the technology to get that is a difficult strategic move. And so what I do to get to the point of those easy gains is very difficult. I think that's and it's like everyone thinks that there's opportunity to make money and have a business. Where's the opportunity? How can I make money? How can I start a business in AI? It is the messiest industry ever. It is just such a disaster of a place. There's tons of opportunity, but forging your path right now in AI is such a muddy place.
Is that because of the proliferation of tools, or because so much is yet to be discovered? Is it all of those things?
It's because, yes, the technology is moving at the speed of light. So unless you are a dedicated AI consultant, you will not be able to stay up with the pace of change. And also the society, the people that you're working with, you have that. In marketing, we always talk about that education. Like you'll have to educate. You have to educate your customers, your clients so much before you can actually sell your product or work for them. That it's a high barrier of entry. So it's just pace of change and that education factor. It's 2 years from now, I do think that there's a huge amount of value to the people that get in right now, that are doing the hard work right now. I think those of us that are like working our tail off right now will emerge ahead. But it's not an easy place to be.
Well, when you jump in at that level, you understand the fundamentals. I see this a lot with social media, right? Social media from a content side, I don't think it's rocket science, but there's a lot of people who come in with they're knowledgeable about how to use the platforms, but they don't have a foundation in communication. They don't have a foundation in storytelling, and it kind of goes off the rails pretty quickly. But if you're someone who started with these tools when you had to master those fundamentals, and you worked, through it as organic became a little more challenging to get people's attention. You had to learn or use storytelling. It's not about the technical expertise. It's about that with a foundation where you understand it at a different level. I think it's probably similar to what you're experiencing. Yeah,
it is. It's just like with anything. Like, I feel like I understand photography a lot more because I started by doing film. Yeah. It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. When you have a broad understanding of any topic, you definitely can apply it and understand it. Yeah.
Okay, last quick hit question. What is a tool, a hack, a trick, a tip, an AI tool, if you will, that you think deserves more credit, that maybe isn't well known but should be? And it doesn't have to be an AI tool, but it could be.
If I were going to well, first of all, if you're generating images in our AI right now, you don't know about ideogram. Okay. That is no one's talking about it.
So tell us about ideogram.
It generates images with text accurately, like not just headlines, but like strings of text, like sentences. Headlines, like it's an image generator that no one talks about. I've been using it for 2 years now. Okay. And it's just really good at It's different. Like, I use Midjourney for my photorealistic and that kind of stuff, but ideogram is just one that nobody really talks about. Okay. And I'm like, why is everyone not talking about it? It's really good. Really bad at some things too, just like AI is just not. But ideogram, but number one thing, like if I had one thing to say, like if you're only doing one thing in AI, you need to be building assistants. Mm-hmm. Building assistants in ChatGPT, custom GPTs, in Google as gems, and in Anthropic Claude as projects. These little guys, I think they're like little AIs, like baby AIs. These little baby AIs. Like, I have created so many of these little assistants. They aren't agents. They don't do things autonomously, but they are lifesavers. Like, they do all of these mundane, repetitive tasks, or they up-level your work for you. I would be right now focusing on building a bunch of these assistants. That's the hack, and that's where I would focus my time.
And if someone doesn't know how to do that, I now know a person who can tell them how to do that.
Yes. I mean, the workshop will be over when this launches, but
I'm sure you'll do another
there's already people that are asking for another one. So.
Well, great. Well, and I'm sure that you'll do another one, and it'll be in person when you do it.
Yes. You got to show up.
If you're in Fort Wayne, you got to show up. All right. Well, Angie, this was super fun. I really appreciate you doing it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode. We're not going to edit that out. Let's leave it in just to throw them a curveball.
Yeah.
This episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast will be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then. Thank you for listening to the Asher Marketing Podcast. The Asher Marketing Podcast is a production of Asher Agency, a full-service agency for franchises and co-ops, colleges and universities, financial service companies, healthcare organizations, and government agencies. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.